Welcome to this Beam Exchange Grab the Mic webinar. We call it a Grab the Mic webinar because it's an open space for practitioners in the market systems development world to present their knowledge, their experience and ideas and share them. And we're very privileged, I'm very privileged to introduce you to four speakers today who are coming from the US, Kenya, Tanzania and Nigeria, speaking from those countries. They're going to be talking about commercial agricultural extension and how that has evolved over the last few years. When they finish speaking, you'll have a chance to ask questions using the Q&A button, which you'll find in the little menu down the bottom of the screen. My name is Mike Albu. I run the Beam Exchange, so it's my privilege to host these events. And then the speakers that I'm going to introduce you to today are Bill Grant from DAI, who's the global practice lead for market systems development and was the technical director for both the projects, or two of the projects we're going to hear about today, which is MADE and PINNed. Then we have Susan Maina from Kenya Markets Trust. She's the market systems development specialist and sector manager for agricultural inputs in KMT. And after that, we'll hear Precious Agbunno from the PINNed Foundation in Nigeria. He is their, he leads the market development work that the PINNed Foundation do. PINNed is a local institution who works with diverse partners in the Niger Delta to address systemic causes of poverty and conflict. So not just market systems development, they do a whole range of peace building stuff. But Precious is responsible for the market systems work. And finally, we'll hear from David Wozemba, works for Gatsby Africa and is Deputy Director of their Cotton and Textiles Development Program in Tanzania. So we should be ready to go, I think. We've nearly got the magic 100, Bill, but I think we should probably start because we're a couple of minutes into the allotted time. We don't want to run over. So Bill, would you like to kick off? And I think the question on my mind at least is, or the thing I'd like you to do is to take us through the different types of players who are engaged in commercial agri-extension services and explain how that has kind of evolved over time.
Okay, thanks Mike. Welcome everyone. My name is Bill Grant from DAI, and it's my pleasure to introduce the overall frameworks that we're going to be talking about today around developing commercially driven agricultural extension. There has been so much good work done on this of late that I think we'll all get a lot out of it. Oops. How come it's not advancing? Sorry. Smallholder productivity across Africa is very low due to a combination of low farmer technical education and low use of inputs and technology. The two must go hand in hand to increase productivity. The technical definition of agricultural extension is the application of scientific research and new knowledge to agricultural practices through farmer education. But we've added on to that and expanded the definition to now include farmer-required business skills. As farmers have a better understanding of the costing and marketing issues, they understand problems and become more willing to pay for solutions. There is increasing recognition by firms, both large and small, that it is in their interest to provide advice to farmers. So we have new models that are linking extension with promotion and sales or purchase of product. Sharing technical information with farmers is good for the core business of many companies. It will lead to increased sales of goods and services. In addition, farmers will pay for solutions if they understand the problem and see the benefits. The goal of commercially driven extension then becomes, how can the companies demonstrate the value proposition to increase farmer productivity and sales, which will lead the farmers to purchase their goods and services. There are quite a few different types of extension providers. Obviously, government extension services are the traditional ones, but this has been fraught with challenges: budgetary issues for salaries and operating expenses, motivational, access to latest technologies and training. They provide mostly advice on good agricultural practices and some linkages. We have large agro-allied firms Major input companies want to sell their inputs to farmers. They have the latest technologies. They use demonstrations, teach good agricultural practices, and distribute trial packs to promote adoption. Major off-takers want to purchase the right products at the right time in the right quantities, and Extension can communicate that information to make it possible. We have managed value chain companies who bring inputs, technical advice, demonstrations, and they purchase the outputs, making money on sale of inputs and purchasing the outputs. There is a new category of local private extension providers who I find really fascinating. These are farmer-facing. It's a combination of local fabricators and agro-retailers, those who have hard product to sell and want to build the demand for their goods through greater awareness of the value. They use demonstrations, trial packs, and build relationships with farmers. There are technical service providers, have a technical skill to sell, like agronomy or veterinarians, and they do it through technical and business training. They organize demonstrations, sell the full range of smaller services and inputs, and often work with other operators. And we have business service providers. They have business skills to sell, finance, marketing, technology, and they work with the technical service providers to expand sales and help farmers access finance and markets. The revenue streams for these different people will vary. Sometimes farmers will pay directly. They'll pay for training if they see the value. But mostly, this extension service is being offered really as an embedded or subsidized service to promote sales of other goods and services or value and output purchased. As we look at the evolution of these, as Mike mentioned, in the beginning, we had basically people selling, and then Extension was providing advice. The first major shift came with the agro-allied inputs, who began to provide a lot more input, leading to greater sales. The agro-allied output marketing companies came next, and they were working with Extension services to increase understanding of product requirements. The managed value chain firms have been really developing a lot in the last 10 years. And we have the new one, which is the local private extension, which I mentioned. These have really started to come up of late, and we've had some really good experiences in Nigeria with this. And they are actually kind of the glue that pulls everything together now and are playing an increasing role. So we've seen that this is becoming a very a much deeper network of players. And this is creating more resilient systems. We have farmers as clients instead of as beneficiaries. We have good coordination with strong win-win relationships between the market actors. We're seeing good competition to provide the best choice and quality of services to farmers. This more resilient system is also very responsive to problems such as the COVID pandemic. The presentations we're going to be covering today, Kenya Markets Trust and Gatsby, are going to start more from the agricultural input-driven model and talk about their experience there with ICT linkage platforms as well. The Pinned and Made in the Niger Delta will focus on the local private extension service provision. And at the very end, David will have a final slide that will pull it all together. Thank you very much. Mike, back over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. That was excellent and very succinct. So let's just go straight over then to Susan Maina in Nairobi. I think you're in Nairobi, Susan, but I hope if not. But Susan, could you tell us a bit then about the status of extension services in Kenya at the moment and the work that KMT, Kenya Markets Trust, is doing in this sphere?
Well, thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. I am Susan Maina. I'm the Inputs Sector Manager at Kenya Markets Trust. KMT is a Kenyan organization focused on transforming key sectors in Kenya using a market systems approach. So I'll spend the next few minutes sharing our experience at KMT in piloting different commercial models of extension delivery, starting with the context in Kenya. So the Kenyan economy is largely agriculture-based, with the sector accounting for 35% of the national GDP and 65% of our export earnings. Public funding for agricultural R&D and extension has steadily fallen, with the ratio of national extension staff to farmers remaining low at 1 extension worker to 1,000 farmers. The sector is dominated by smallholder farmers, and the proportion of these farmers accessing private extension advice is low, with existing private services tending to favor the commercial medium to large-scale farmers, and also concentrates more on product marketing rather than farmer education. With the buoyant of private sector, Kenya is home to a quarter of agri-tech solutions in Africa, but this has not been exploited at scale, and the sustainability is an issue, as most of these have been heavily funded by donors. Now, with the main objective of transforming the input sector in Kenya, KMT has been exploring different models to address the problem of extension services. And the key principles that have guided our approach include alignment of incentives, scalability of the model, ensuring quality of services, access and affordability of these services. Now, I will explain each of these models that KMT has rolled out and how these have progressed over time. The first model is led by the agro-dealers. These are the rural agri-input stockists. These retailers are farmers' primary point of focus and farming advice. A key feature in this model is increasing farmer outreach and support through sales commission agents and provision of bundled services with product sales. As a result, incentives get aligned, farmers begin to invest in more appropriate inputs, and agro-dealers generate more sales. And we see regional agro-dealer hubs also hosting farmer educational expos and set up demo farms. The retail system is now moving in the right direction in Kenya, with over 500 agro-dealers investing in farmer support services. The second model, which is sort of expanding on the first model, is led by the agro-input manufacturers and expands the initiatives by the agro-dealers. Now, just like the retail end, manufacturers see the value of incorporating extension support with their product sales. Using this model, then manufacturers invest in various strategies that include R&D and formation of strategic partnerships with agro-dealers, and this enables efficient last-mile distribution. Setup of demo farms, and also increasing the numbers of sales agents who promote smallholder learning through educational events. With large companies, 14 of them, adopting new retail strategies, competition to provide quality services for the smallholder is increasing, and embedding extension support to support sales is becoming the norm within the market system. While these models have worked well in terms of impact, we looked at a different model, and really this is to help address some of the limitations with the first two models. And so most recently, we established, we facilitated establishment of a village service providers model, the VSPs. Now, as more companies crowd in and the smallholders' outreach activities expand, there are emerging opportunities to improve the structures of extension services. While still under pilot, this model aims to bring unified extension messaging. So, for example, need on support on need for soil testing and liming should be similar across all the service providers. Now, this is even better if it's coming from one source or a single consistent source. The VSP model, the VSPs are independent advisors who are commercially linked to multiple input farms through an ICT platform. The subscription-based platform is enabling companies to access these VSPs, who then educate farmers on their behalf. The VSPs promote new technologies and appropriate usage of information. As well, the VSPs carry out certain inputs, and this enables them to have extra income, and this would include crop spraying services, pruning services, fumigation, etc. While full commercial offers are yet to be established, the VSP model is expected to scale rapidly while offering great benefits, especially to the smallholder regions, in the remote regions. And you can see the impact numbers there. We've progressed and looking at how to make the model more inclusive using the VSPs. On to our learnings. What have we learned from the three models? With the agro dealers, their capacity to manage multiple numbers of agents is low, and thus this limits their scale. However, the agro dealers play a vital role as frontline information extension providers or messaging agents, and there is therefore great need to strengthen their relationships and linkages with input suppliers to enable better information flows. On the input farms, the model creates sustained competitive pressure for companies to deliver value to the smallholders. However, as the numbers of companies participating in the market is increasing, there is a risk of causing confusion and fatigue. Strategies that deliver unified extension support could be more beneficial. And thus, looking at the VSP model, a key learning there has been this particular model provides value for input farms by reducing their administration and overhead costs. However, there is a risk surrounding this model as the significant capital required there is significant capital investment required, but also the amount of time needed to build a critical mass of service providers with access to multiple input companies. There is a lot of time that's required for that. Across the three models, use of ICT is also becoming a must, really, especially at this time of COVID. And what we are seeing is an increasing number of companies looking into different ICT support services and messaging services. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to sharing more on our progress and learning from these models in the near future. Over to you, Mike.
Well, thank you, Susan. Also very interesting, and thanks for giving that sort of Kenya perspective and the models that are being used there. Let's then, for contrast or comparison, hear from you, David. Sorry, Precious Agbunno in Nigeria. Can you tell us what's your experience has been of sort of innovating sustainable services in the Niger Delta? Precious, you're still muted.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Hey, well, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, all right. So thank you very much. I think I want to start by talking a bit about Pain Foundation and MAID and the Niger Delta region. The Niger Delta region in Nigeria is made up of about 40 million people. It has huge oil resources, but with contrasting high levels of poverty and conflict due to distortions. In 2010, Pain Foundation, being an acronym for Partnership Initiative in the Niger Delta, was set up by Chevron Corporation with an overarching goal of reducing poverty and conflict in the region. And then in 2013, MAID, the Market Development Project in the Niger Delta, was set up by DFID to accompany PAIN to jointly address the systemic causes of poverty and market failure in the region. So both projects worked at various levels to carry out value chain analysis of viable sectors in the Niger Delta, and also utilize the market systems approach to design and implement value chain interventions in 5 agricultural value chains and 2 cross-cutting sectors. Now, one of the key findings from the value chain analysis was the need for a better understanding of how to address farmers' productivity through extension services. The government extension services program was in a very poor state due to low government funding and lack of skills and incentives on the part of the agents. And there were very few local private extension services providers. And these few were mainly donor focused. I didn't kind of understand the problems of the farmers. So they were offering, products and services that were of no value to the farmers. And the farmers, on the other hand, were not willing to pay for these services because they weren't getting the value. So there was kind of poor alignment of value and incentives in the market systems for extension services in the Niger Delta. And this was compounded by the huge handout mentality prevalent in the region. So it was clear. So it was clear from the beginning for both projects to achieve that large-scale sustainable impact there was a need to invest in building the capacity of the extension services market in the region. And so how did the project respond to this challenge? First, we started by identifying entrepreneurial local service providers and also work with them, particularly those that has the right mentality, the right skill and willingness to provide their services commercially to farmers. We work with them to pilot some models in some of the high value sectors, like the aquaculture sector that has a lot of commercial farmers. But before we started the pilots, we first of all had to invest in building a series of technical capacity building activities to build the capacity of the service providers. First, we invested in technical training materials and methodology to equip the service providers with the right tools and skills to provide quality services to farmers. We brought in sector experts to develop materials, kits, to enable the service providers to provide services to farmers. We also invested in providing enterprise training to the service providers. First, what we had to do was actually kind of to lay out the incentives and value propositions, to get them to begin to see the need to offer their services commercially to farmers. And also we taught them how to sell these trainings and solutions to farmers. And because it requires a different set of skills to sell services than it is to sell products. And one of the things that we also did over a time, particularly in the initial phase, was to begin to work with the service providers to change the way they view the farmers, begin to see the farmers as their clients and not the donor organizations. We also invested heavily in building relationships between the service providers and some key market actors that are important to improving their value offerings. Input companies, we link them to financial institutions, to large corporate buyers, and also to farmer groups. Now, part of what we also did was to provide smart grants to the service providers to kind of help them to help buy down risk and for them to work with us to test out some of the new models in some of the sectors. Now, currently, we have, for very few service providers, we have over 2,000 service providers working with us in various sectors in the Niger Delta, providing services to thousands of farmers. And currently, we have about 3 types of service providers. We have the technical extension services providers, and this group of people provide training to farmers in specific sectors, particular sectors where they have the competency and expertise to provide technical trainings. They also carry out demonstrations, and also currently are now beginning to provide other solutions like water testing and soil testing. We have the business service providers who offer business development services, and these guys have actually been very successful linking farmers to new markets and funding opportunities. We also have those who retail products. So they're product retailers, but they kind of have embedded service offerings in their sales strategy. So they carry out promotions and demonstrations to teach farmers how to use their product. And in doing so, they expect that farmers will buy this product while they will also make some money. So we have agro dealers, seed entrepreneurs, village level vaccine dealers, and all different kinds of product retailers who are playing in this space. Now, one of the key changes, I would say, is that the service providers now understand the concept of value. And they reflect this in pricing their service offerings to the farmers and small enterprises. But how did all this evolve? Like I said earlier, well, very few of them initially when the project started. And many of them started out as one-man companies, typically selling to projects, NGOs, and other donors. And then we brought them to attend our capacity building programs, and they began to change their mindset and service offerings. They began to add new products in their sectors and also began to move in new sectors. For example, aquaculture service providers who were mainly providing training services and began to carry out demonstrations in partnership with input companies. They began to provide water tests, other types of solutions to farmers. And as they began to master the act, they began to move for them into the poultry sector where their skill can also be applied. And this continued to happen. They began to create linkages between themselves. So those that are specialists in business began to work with those that have technical competency to kind of create joint ventures, in order to leverage each other's competencies and relationships, in order to improve the value of their service offerings to farmers. And as this began to happen, they greatly began to expand their client base, from less than 100 farmers that most of them they were reaching a year to thousands of farmers. And for this to happen, that meant they had to increase their staff strength. So we saw them, from 0 staff strength some of them employing up to 50 staff currently. And also they began to move outside of their communities into other communities, out of their states into other states in the Niger Delta. So we have service providers who are providing services to 6 states out of the 9 states in the Niger Delta. So this is kind of evolving a lot faster than even the project is able to keep pace with. What the diagram you have on the right kind of lays out the evolution process. You know, the building block was a capacity building program that we offered to them, and then we work with them to pilot and then replicate and adapt some of these models into other sectors. We sort of began to change their mindset, became more entrepreneurial, and this led to growth and sustainability. So how has this really impacted on the project, particularly the Made and Paint project? As of 2015, you can see that by then we had just about 200 service providers working with us. Before then, between 2012 and 2015, we were investing heavily in building the capacity of the service providers. So as of 2015, we had just 200 service providers working with us, reaching about 11,000 farmers. And by the next year, we had doubled the number of service providers working with us, and they have more than quadrupled the number of farmers reached. And this kind of geometric trend continued. By 2019, we had reached over 560,000 farmers, with more than half of them increasing their income by over 30%. In fact, most of the farmers in our crop sectors increased their yield by over 150% due to the adoption of new varieties of input, improved services, improved method of carrying out their farming practices, and the rest. So currently, we have over 2,000 service providers working in the sector, providing services, greatly, improving the sectors we're working in, making them a lot more stronger. And this is leading to a stronger market resilience. And we're seeing this particularly in this COVID-19 period, where we have seen a lot of adaptations happening. The service providers are doing all they could, innovating different strategies to reach farmers, even in this current situation. They're using virtual platforms. Some are using a combination of virtual platforms and physical trainings, while maintaining the social distancing rules to reach farmers. They're using social media, they're using different ITs, phone, SMS messages, just to keep in touch and provide services to the farmers. They're also collaborating a lot more this period because, for those that have clients to serve in other states where they cannot go to, they're collaborating with other service providers who are located in those communities and states to serve their customers. So they're adapting the service offerings to meet the needs of the farmers a lot more during this period. When there was a lockdown in Nigeria and many of the farmers could not get access to quality input to take advantage of the farming season, the service providers began to utilize other means to improve the distribution of input. A lot of them began to cluster farmers together and purchase the input on bulk on their behalf to send to them. They're also leveraging a lot of the government initiatives around COVID-19 funding schemes to provide access to finance to farmers to be able to purchase inputs during this COVID-19 period. Because some of the inputs, we saw an increase in the prices of inputs during this period. So what has been some of our key learnings from all this? Because we've seen a very dynamic market, and one of the key learnings actually has been that we found that strong fundamental relationships, and because this whole thing, is built on relationships, bring about strong and resilient market systems. And one of the key lessons also for us is that, a strong services market doesn't just happen. It requires targeted efforts, to engender a strong services market. Thank you, Mike. Back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Precious. That's a very, very clear presentation about Nigeria's experience. I'm going to come back in a second to East Africa, to David Wozemba from Gatsby. He's going to talk about Tanzania. Just before I do that, I just wanted to say, I'm glad to see there's quite a few questions coming in now. If you don't feel like asking a question, you can still give a thumbs up to someone else's question, which would be a nice way for me to see which questions people really want answered. I can see a few thumbs up for John Chettle's for his question already. So that's obviously high on the list. But yeah, do use that Q&A box and have a quick look at it if you have a chance while we're talking, so that you can flag up the questions that you want answered, even if you haven't got one of your own. David, you're in the privileged position. We've now got 118 people actually attending. I'm glad to say so. We've passed that magic number easily. David, you're going to talk about Gatsby's work, I know, and in particular, I think what I'm interested in at least is how the market for extension services has evolved over the years. And you now have this this ICT platform that Susan was talking about, so that's particularly something that we'd be keen to hear more about.
Thank you, Michael. Glad to be able to speak at the last. David Wozemba is my name, Deputy Director for the Cotton and Textile Program in Tanzania. Just to give a little quick background, our sector transformation program focuses on cotton, textiles, and apparel value chain. So we're looking at the whole value chain. And Gatsby has worked in Tanzania over the last 10 years. And we're working mainly in the Lake Zone. We reach closely to 550,000 smallholder farmers who are actually growing rain-fed cotton. There are some challenges. The key challenges in the Lake Zone facing the cotton farmer are low investment in inputs and services, limited access to extension service. And as a result, Tanzania's yields have gone significantly low. Currently, the farmer is harvesting close to 250 kilograms per acre. And if you compare this to what is happening in other countries like West Africa, they do close to 800 kilograms per acre or more. Therefore, the farmers in the Lake Zone are constrained by a number of factors. And we've said the first is inputs are funded by the industrial level, which delivers limited volumes or poor quality inputs. And these inputs are often delayed. It's also important to note that if these inputs are delayed, there's also the other aspect of a strict government extension system in which we have close to 1,238 extension farmers covering a population of close to 10 million people in the Lake Zone. Remember we have close to over 500,000 farmers who are growing cotton, but there are those that are growing other crops too, and they're being serviced by similar extension providers. Enhanced access to inputs and extension. Our program developed a village-based agro-dealer agent of the last mile distribution network. And to note that, the network includes close to 545 commercial agents. We call them the local private extension providers. They sell inputs at village level and provide embedded services. Critical to appreciate that. And this is funded through profit or commissions on input sales. The village-based agro agent network serves over close to, we've just over the last 1 year, analyzed, and they're serving close to 160,000 smallholder farmers, who are producing a range of crops. But we need to expand the network and its impact. I've just mentioned we moved close to 545 village-based agents. We want to move that beyond that. So we recently started collaborating with a commercial digital service provider called Kilimo Maendeleo Digital Platform. It's a value chain integrator. It has been operating successfully in other regions. I'm happy to say that. And this platform registers farmers, demonstrating the market potential to the market actors. It also crowds in input suppliers agro-dealers, financial institutions, and others. But its coordination role reduces the transaction costs and enhances farmer reach and improves the model sustainability. That is how the digital Kilimo Maendeleo has been of help to us. You're reducing the transaction and enhancing farmers' reach. How does the platform enhance extension delivery? The platform onboards and provides commission payments to incentivize extension providers. These include the para-extension agents, the village-based agro-dealers, the lead farmers, and others. It also provides remote agronomic information in collaboration with other actors within the system. And this is through the call center, which is a mechanism through which farmers can call and receive sufficient information. We also have the regional committee, with the public and private sector representation that coordinates the extension service infrastructure. Remember, the role of public sector is critical, but also private sector. This integration of the, both private and public has been very critical for us. This has enhanced the reach of the government extension network. Just to note that the model is trying to address a range of challenges, and we don't yet have all the answers to note. We know that commercials are who pays, and we've been able to develop embedded services. We've been able to develop commission from inputs, but still there's limited funding of government and general extension services. Reaching large number of smallholder farmers, we still have coordinated extension provision. We have a call center to support regular information to the farmers. However, there's still limited reach. Remember, we've reached close to 160,000 farmers. And we have close to over 500,000 farmers growing cotton, and more needs to be reached. The breadth and quality of information. We ensure that there's training of trainers funded by commission. Remember, this is a commission generated within the system. There's a customized farm diary that is embedded in there, that is delivered to the farmer to ensure that the farmers have access to the knowledge. However, there's still a current weak quality assurance system that we want to enhance as we go along. Adapting to the COVID, we know there's a combination of face-to-face, and the digital prior to the COVID. We have embedded that and ensure that our mobilizers, our trainers, tend to reach the smallholder farmers with the diaries, the farm diaries, and those farm diaries are actually digitalized later. The information is digitalized. However, there are multiple impacts that we're facing. The reduced incomes, that has the impact on the farmers in order to be able to the purchasing power has gone down. There's also supply disruptions, where most of the farmer input suppliers and others who are in the market access inputs beyond their own boundaries, including Kenya and Uganda and China, those are importing. So there is a supply disruption. So having said that, we as the three countries reflected and said, how then do we take this and what are our thoughts of the three contrasting models that we've talked through? These are our thoughts. We've looked at both the advantages and the challenges that these models face. Let me start with the advantages. The models, we are clear that they stimulate competition, it increases choice, driving up quality and reducing cost. There's a shift in balance of power, where farmer is the king, the willingness for the farmers to be able to fork out and pay for either product or a service if it's embedded in. Sustainability, we're making sure that they're aligned incentives in order for it to continue to be sustainable, to grow. What are some of the challenges that we have observed? Access and reach. We continue to struggle to reach the poorest of the poor. And this is a question that everybody raises. That when you commercialize the extension service, does it get to those who are, are poorest of the poor? That is the challenge that we continue to. There's a whole issue around impartiality, which is all around embedded services, and how do they compromise the ability to reach? The whole issue of quality control, which is again reflected on how robust the system, the framework is in order to get to the quality information to the smallholder farmers and beyond, and therefore sustain the system to grow with the quality that it comes and the value that it generates. So the value for money aspect is critical as you deliver service or product. Is the farmer willing and able to pay because they realize the quality that comes with it? Thank you. Those are our thoughts. And back to you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, David. Really clear, another really clear presentation. Wow, this has been really great. I can see we're getting a lot of questions coming in now, so I'm going to kind of go quick to them as quickly as possible. Don't forget to use the chat box, the Q&A box to register your questions, or indeed to flag up questions that you want me to ask. I'm going to start, if you don't mind, Bill, with you. I'm going to give you a kind of amalgamated question, actually. So we had there's a question from Simon Levine, which is pointing out that the data that's being discussed here tends to be about turnover or yields rather than profit. And are any of the projects collecting data on what the profits that farmers are making? And also related kind of question about the operational kind of aspect of all of this. How long does it take for agricultural extension services to generate a return on investment for the businesses that are investing in providing them? That was from your colleague Don Humpel. So if you could start with that, and then Bill, after you've answered those questions, I'm going to move over to some more kind of strategic questions. There seems to be two things that are on people's minds really fundamentally here. One is who's being reached or not being reached by these services, and what can we do about inclusion? So there's lots of questions in that area I'm going to try and get to. And then the second set of questions that have got people exercised are, I think you mentioned it at the end there, David, quality, but also questions about whose knowledge, what kind of knowledge is being shared here, and is it necessarily the right kind of knowledge? So I'll come on to those. Let's come on to those in the third part of the Q&A. But let's start with a few operational things. And Bill, those two questions about measuring profits and the time on return on investment would be interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. I think that those are very good questions. You know, the data on turnover, I think Precious did actually provide some information about how long, you know, what kinds of yield. So we were showing 30% increases in profitability among the farmers. That was net attributable additional income, or net attributable income change. And so there is information on that. What we found, though, is that, you know, the enterprise training is actually delivered to the farmers by many of the extension workers. And it's as the farmers begin to understand how they can make more money that they begin to make those rational decisions to purchase the services that will help them do that. And so in Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Agricultural Enterprise Curriculum, which had been developed many, many years ago, but never commercialized. And we actually took it and got it into the hands of local consultants who are using it both with central bank funded loans and down to just individual consultants. And, you know, I mean, I've heard lead farmers tell me, he says, Bill, as soon as we run through the enterprise curriculum with the farmers, he said it's as if light bulbs go off in their heads and they begin to understand market and costing and they see where their problems are. So I think that's a fundamental part of the kind of getting the business skills. It's not just about saying you get more yield, because if you double your yield and you put it into the market, all you're doing is pushing down prices. So you may not actually make more money. in terms of the time it takes to get to return on investment, I mean, it took us 3 years to kind of figure out the models. And then it took time, but once our lead consultants figured it out, they took it up very, very quickly. And we had people going from, you know, as Precious mentioned, 100 farmers to up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 farmers. And they were bringing in qualified staff to do this. And, you know, one of the consultants, I said, well, where do you get your extension agents? And he says, these aren't just village-based agents. He says, I'm getting them from the university. There are lots of unemployed PhDs, MSCs, BSCs. I'm hiring them, I'm training them, and I'm deploying them. And so Nigeria may be different from other countries, but there's a huge pool of untapped resources that are out there. And so it accelerated very quickly. We've, you know, within 2 or 3 years, we saw people's numbers just increase tremendously. So the time, I think there's the laying of the foundation, but I think now the foundation is laid in many countries, most countries, and the methodologies are now being understood and the value propositions are articulated. So I think it can be a much more rapid turnover. It was important to find the right people. I mean, I would say out of the first 50 people we trained, 5 became the main drivers. But those 5 found all the others and they started bringing them in. And the networking has been really phenomenal between them. So, you know, we have lots of agro-retailers and kind of village agents, but there's this core group of good, solid consultants have been making money very, very well. I think that answers the two.
Yeah.
And probably share with the others the opportunity to go into the other question.
Yeah, no, we've only got sort of 10 or 15 minutes, so let's rattle through this if we can, because there's such a lot of good questions. Look, so a number of people have asked the same sort of question in general. So David Boselli, for example, asks whether programs are segmenting farmers. Are you distinguishing between different kinds of farmers? And Sally Smith asked the same sort of question in the sense that she said, how do we ensure that these commercially driven services are inclusive, they're not biased, you know, towards those able to pay, which tends to be men, which tends to be larger farmers. So David, if you don't mind addressing that question of how can we work to ensure these commercial services are more inclusive? And it might be worth pointing out also, there was a quote, someone said, you know, you said in your summary, you know, we're not reaching the poorest of the poor, but then there's also a question which is, do public extension services reach the poorest of the poor anyway? Perhaps you could comment on that.
Thank you, Michael. It's a good question. It's a question that lingers in our minds every time we go out to do work. But let me clearly state that when we talk about the poorest of the poor, the element of the risk increases for all the actors who are actually integrated in the system. And our system, which looks at value chain integrator, looks at what value is generated for each of the actors who are on the platform. However, what have we done? The first thing, we rely on the group concept. We register the number of farmers who are actually on the platform. And right now we have close to 40,000. We passed 35 a couple of weeks ago, close to 40,000 farmers on the platform. What do we do? These farmers are registered based on, one, the crop, they profile them, and secondly, they also start to show the needs as we profile the needs that are profiled in there in terms of access to loans, for example, access to inputs. So across all this, we now start to realize who then needs what and what is the cost of what needs to be delivered. If it is a loan for across a board, if the segments requires those that require a loan below a certain segment, there is an embedded service that is required to a cost that is attached to embedded service of extension. And that is generally taken care of. However, we have the mobilizers, those who are actually based in the rural areas, who are actually mobilizing the farmers and telling them what needs to be done to be, be able to either successfully, upgrade themselves from being so vulnerable to the next level. And those are the mobilizers who actually, every time they recruit a new farmer and register on the platform, there is a value that is accrued to it. So those then start to give us pointers. And then when we segment these farmers, there's a huge opportunity for each of the actors across board to start providing the services. Beyond that, we have the farm diary that is given to a farmer who is registered, and that farmer diary accompanies the extension information. That information is supported by the mobilizer who helps the farmer to be able to know what they need to do. And it's beyond one crop. It's not necessarily only cotton. We have more than one crop in the farm diary. So that gives a farmer who is maybe not growing cotton, but growing maize and others, opportunity to have access to the information that they can use to enhance, again, their productivity. So that is taken care of at different levels. We have the call center, which still guarantees a farmer who actually is unable to possibly pay for that, but also call and find out what is required. However, there are para-extensions that I mentioned, those who are located in the villages. Those para-extensions, every time the farmer calls to the call center, the information is related to a para-extension who is localized. Because the para-extension is localized, then they go to that farmer and provide that information, or provide that information to the farmer in the language that the farmer appreciates. So those are areas that we're trying to incorporate and make sure that the different segments are taken care of. It's a challenge, but at least largely we've been successful in enhancing access to service. Remember, we built this model around the village-based agro-dealers were initial lead farmers, and they had their intention also to provide information at the initial start, but they graduated to become dealers who are selling inputs. So their role still is vital in the rural areas because they have a cluster of farmers that they want to service, and each farmer is critical if they buy their product, but it has to be accompanied by information.
Okay.
Mike, if I can just add one thing, in Mozambique, we carried out a very in-depth study on kind of the gender aspect, and what we discovered was that agro-dealers and and input providers could be increasing their sales by 35% if they simply changed the way they targeted women and made information available to women at the right time. And so getting that value proposition into the hands of the service providers, that if they do things just a little bit differently, they can actually expand their service market. So I think that, understanding, and that's the biggest problem, is we rarely get down to doing that deep analysis, which brings out the information that we can then share with the service providers. I mean, this is what we did in Nigeria with the big feed companies. They were saying, oh, we're selling lots of feed. But we said, but do you realize that you're only selling to 10% of the market? You can increase your sales tenfold if you start thinking of the other. And they said, what? Really? We can do that? We said, yeah. They said, show us how. So I think that getting that value proposition into the hands of the people who are trying to promote things is very important, because that tells them what the potential client base is.
So look, with only 5 minutes left, I'm slightly cautious about launching into this conversation, but let's do so, because John Chettleborough put a question up which has been very popular. And essentially it's about whose knowledge, what content. I mean, Susan, the ICT platform is pushing information and information ideas and advice out through the network. Where does that come from? I mean, John's question specifically, if you've seen it, is quite a long question. I may not read it all out, but essentially is saying that the assumption appears to be that knowledge needs to come from top down. It needs to come from experts outside the farming world, or outside of villages who can tell farmers how to farm more effectively. And the risk he flags up is that this undermines and devalues the kind of indigenous knowledge systems of farmers that have been there, if you like, for thousands of years in some cases. and that there's a risk, therefore, that you end up with a degraded knowledge system around agriculture because of this reliance on external advice. So I'm wondering if he's wondering, is it possible for commercial extension to coexist with traditional knowledge systems if resilience is to be improved? And maybe Susan, you can start by reflecting on that in the context of your ICT platform, and then maybe Precious, you might have a view on that question as well.
Yeah, interesting. So, what knowledge and whose knowledge? Now, it has to be a double-pronged approach to this. In the way that our work started in Kenya, really started with the agro dealers. It's like Mike was saying about the power of the retailers, and so ours started with looking at do the smallholders even know about the existence of certain technologies? So, for example, are they even aware of soil testing services or technologies to enable them, apply the appropriate or purchase the appropriate fertilizers? And so when you look at such an example, and it means that the knowledge first needs to come from the top. It needs the commercial companies ought to invest in that, passing that knowledge to the farmers so that they are aware, and then they start demanding for added services to that particular knowledge. But of course, that has come with its own ups and downs, because depending on who is able to get to the remote villages faster, then farmers might just assume, for example, one blend or one brand of fertilizer is the key to high or improvement of productivity. And so it ought to be a mix. It ought to be companies pushing information because it is important for the farmers to know. But there is also a very interesting, observation now in Kenya, where we are seeing, as a result of more knowledge, farmers are now the ones demanding. Now, interestingly, so we are looking at what level, what segments of farmers are actually, able to get in the information and want more information by way of that information coming from them, in terms of inquiries to the companies. Still a very small proportion when you look at the number of farmers we are talking about in Kenya, because 80% of our farmers are small holdings. Now, about 50 or more % of that are farmers who are probably not in the level of big understanding of ICTs and how to use this ICT. And so we are looking at a mix of both, that information ought to come from the commercial end to the farmers, but also looking into systems of creating more demand so that farmers know that they can use same systems to push inquiries to the service providers or to the companies. Yes, traditional knowledge is very important, and it cannot be overlooked. I mean, a very interesting concept here, because, for example, for a very long time, acidic soils have, or what we call ash, has been cured by use of, ash has been used to cure acidity, right? And we now have more available, easily available agricultural lime, which is a commercially available product. And so when messaging to the farmers, yes, there are instances where you need to help them understand that the same technologies that they've been using, but with a better efficiency in terms of the product that is now available in the market. And so again, when you look at the service providers that are emerging now, the commercial service providers, most of them come from actually 99% of these come from the villages. And so they understand the traditional applications and traditional technologies that then modern technologies can incorporate to make it better for the farmers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Precious, we're kind of running out of time, so a quick answer would be useful, sticking on the same subject.
Yes.
Of knowledge.
So Mike, thank you. Yeah, so I can quickly add something. I totally agree with Susan. And I think that, yes, commercial extension service providers can coexist with traditional knowledge systems. But at the end of the day, I think that the idea, it boils down to, our farmers addressing their constraints, their needs being addressed by the kind of knowledge they're getting. So we know that commercial extension service providers go out of their ways to get new skills, new knowledge, to ensure that their services are adding value to farmers. So for me, at the end of the day, it boils down to value to the farmers. They'll be willing to pay for whatever will add value to them. So if they're getting it free from the traditional system, it's fine. But it's how that value it's getting to the farmers and how they're utilizing. That's what I want.
I think just on top of that, the local private extension providers are local, so they are much more aware. So it's not like it's a top-down. I think that's one of the interesting things about this newer model, where you have local people who are from the local communities who are client-facing. Their relationship is with the farmers, and the farmers actually follow them. And so the farmers trust them, but they develop that trust by building relationships with them, which would include learning more about the local things that they're doing, because these service providers want to give the best value to their clients. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I think we'll have to make that the final word, even though we have, still a lot of really interesting open questions.